Good morning. My name is Tim Chen. I'm the chair of the Aid Northwest Board of Directors. Welcome to the community meeting. I'm pleased to have you with us. Today we have immigration lawyer extraordinaire from NWIRP. She's out of the Tacoma office, and she will go first because she has an engagement at around 10:30. So we need to let her go first, and then we'll wrap up with Deborah give you some latest statistics. Please enter your Q&A and or questions in the chat or the Q&A session, and Natalie will pick them up and we'll try to get to them before Julie has to disappear. So Julie, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I have a few different topics to talk about today, but I hope that people feel free to ask questions, and I'll try to look in the chat, but feel free to, any of the panelists, like flag me or say something if I don't see it. And the first thing I want to say is just how much NWIRP appreciates the work of Aid Northwest, because I can't even explain how much of a difference it makes to know that if a client or someone we're working with gets released, they are going to have help right away when they get out. I can't even explain how important that is, and especially having worked in different organizations and having friends who work in different detention centers across the country where they don't have that support. Yeah, NWIRP really appreciates it, and I'm so glad that that we all have each other. It sounds a little silly. So one thing that we had talked about that I'll just start with is talk a little bit about what it's like to be an attorney at NWIRP working out of the detention center. So there's a lot of different units at NWIRP, and I'll talk a little bit about what I do and what the team on the detained docket does. So I am in a unit called DIA, Detained Immigrant Advocates, which is very similar to Aid Northwest's name now that I'm thinking about it. But we represent people who are fighting their deportation case out of the detention center. So we'll work on a client's case from start to finish. Sometimes that means doing appeals or even multiple appeals. And so each of us has a small number of clients that we're working on their case at any given time. Then we work on any type of case. So that might mean asylum or humanitarian protection. It might mean cancellation of removal. It also means fighting for their release if they are eligible to be released from the detention center, because so often that's someone's best option. Obviously in just a human way to be released from the detention center, but also it's very difficult to prepare immigration cases because being detained is so stressful for people, and the timeline is so fast. So that's what I do. We also have a team called Legal Orientation Program, and they do informational sessions for people about the immigration court process, and including what their options might be, what it's like to go to court, what their rights are in court. And they take sort of the initial phone calls from people in the detention center who are looking for information or help on their immigration case. So they aren't necessarily representing as many people in court, but they're taking the initial phone calls for people who want help. So those are kind of some of the things that attorneys and legal advocates at NWIRP are working on if we're working out of the detention center. And related to that, one of the suggestions that you all had that I talk about is talk a little bit about kind of health conditions at the detention center. And as you can imagine, we're seeing a constant stream of COVID cases at the detention center. even with people having access to vaccinations, not as far as we know, it's not mandatory for people who are, it's not mandatory for people who are working there to be getting vaccinated. And so there's a constant stream of COVID cases of people who are working there, and then also people who are detained there, and also people who maybe are detained there even very recently because they were an asylum seeker at the border who got transferred up to the detention center. So that's something that is really stressful for our clients, for people who are detained there, is a constant worry of getting COVID. It also really, in addition to the health problem, it really can disrupt their immigration cases because people they quarantine. If someone has possibly been exposed to COVID, that person is quarantined. That might mean that they miss their court date and their case gets delayed further. And that means that they're being detained for a longer amount of time because of the whole COVID situation. So, and it's also, as I think you all know, really affected, now there are still no visitors to the detention center, which is just so inhumane to think about people who've been detained there for a year, 2 years, longer, and haven't been able to have a single friend, family, community visitor. It's really, really difficult for people. And we as NWIRP have been really limiting our visits into the detention center because kind of for the safety of everyone involved. And I know that is really hard for clients because sometimes if they don't have friends or family or community in the area, their legal team are the people that they used to interact with in person the most. And now there isn't even that. It also affects the immigration case in that we're doing most things by phone. And so in terms of trust building, in terms of people feeling safe to talk about really sensitive matters, I think that is more difficult to do over the phone than in person. So I think kind of one of the big picture things that I think about is that it's just another example of there's no safe way to detain people. There's no humane way to detain people. And a lot of the problems of the pandemic are problems that were always there at the detention center, and they're just making them even worse because of that. So I think some people know that NWIRP has filed lawsuits, or one main lawsuit around COVID at the detention center, and we were able to get certain mandatory testing and disclosure of positive cases. I think that wasn't the top relief that we were asking for, which would have been more releases of people from detention. We are fortunately still seeing people being released from detention due to health conditions, but it's not everyone, and it's very case by case dependent, and it's not super consistent. And so that is, that's better than those people not being released, but we would have wanted to see that even more. So that is kind of some information about the health conditions there. I see a question, are there plans to offer booster shots? I believe that booster shots have been offered. I think so. I think that like a lot of things at the detention center, the communication is not always clear. So you might have one client have one experience, but then 3 other clients say, oh, I was having trouble accessing one thing or the other. And I think there have been problems at other detention centers across the country with getting booster shots. And so I think that it's a lot of times the sort of like slight slightly better, marginally better conditions at the detention center here are a testament to all of the work of people advocating for themselves inside of the detention center and people outside of the detention center putting pressure to improve things. Deborah, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have something?
Yeah, I have heard from people coming out that they are offering booster shots. And I know that ICE is communicating with the health department in order to make sure that those things happen too. So they've been, they did have an RV down there for a long time. The health department did, just being there to take people as they came out if they had COVID. And so they were monitoring and watching, and they've got statistics on, you know, who's coming out. They get a list every day. So yeah, so there is, you know, they're working with them as much as they possibly can. That's what
I saw a question about how many people are currently detained. I actually don't know offhand. That's something that someone probably from our legal orientation program would know because they're dealing with that on more of a day-to-day basis. It is much, much lower than the maximum capacity of, I think 1,600 is the maximum. And I do know it's a lot, like definitely less than I'm also super bad at numbers, so I'm always hesitant to say anything with that. But yeah, maybe you know, Deborah.
The last number I heard was 500.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right. I was gonna say like 400, 500.
Yeah.
And there's a question here, what a red ID badge indicates. Honestly, I do not know what you are talking about. I do know that people wear different, have different color clothes based on ICE's perceived security, what they would call like security threat level. And that is, and from what I have seen, not something that is consistently or fairly adjudicated, and can, so it doesn't mean convicted of a crime and released from jail. It could mean any number of different things, and it's not something that is very fairly or consistently adjudicated. It's not even an adjudication process. And it also, yeah, you can imagine that someone's going to court, they don't get to choose the clothes that they wear to court. It's the same clothes that they are given there. And you know, how that is just that physical differences in color is going to just affect how they're treated in any number of situations.
It's a part, their security level, right? It's red means high security. So, and then there's orange, which means medium security, and then green, and then blue is low security. So they've never done anything wrong. They've never, you know, looked at somebody wrong, you know, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I know that security levels can change inside the detention center too. So if they, you know, maybe argue with someone or whatever, they might get bumped up to a higher security level.
So we do have a few more questions, Julia, but I just wanted to make sure if you wanted to continue and wait until the end, or.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe I'll wait till the end because I do have a few other, there were, I think it was Tim had sent me some suggested topics. So I'll quickly talk about those, but quite a few of these are topics that I don't necessarily know any more than what's in the news, because it's not something that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis. So I'll just start with that, and I'll try to quickly go through them and then get to questions. One possible topic had been the return to Mexico immigration policy that the Biden administration is still implementing because there was a lawsuit against them when they tried to take away the policy. And I think that is to say that is like a massive disappointment is not the right word. I think a stronger word would be better. Is in the administration is something that I would say about it, that it's a really inhumane policy. It puts people in dangerous situations. And so we, want that to be taken away as soon as possible. In addition, they are continuing to do Title 42 expulsions at the border. And that was a policy that started under the administration, under the Trump administration, which entails using a health policy to expel asylum seekers at the border, and due to COVID. And I believe that actually today, the Biden administration is defending this policy in federal court in oral arguments. Another recent lawsuit was last week at the Supreme Court. Our legal director, Matt Adams, argued in the case Garland v. Gonzalez, which is a case that the government, so it was the Trump administration then, but now is the Biden administration continuing to defend taking away bond hearings for some people who are mandatorily detained at the 6-month mark. So I can send the link for the arguments in that. It's a case that NWIRP has been working on for a long time and fighting for a long time. And it's especially tough to see that the Biden administration is continuing to fight. It did fight it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So those are some lawsuits that are going on, or both policy and lawsuits that are affecting our work, and I think are affecting the number of people at the detention center, because things like the Remain in Mexico policy means that, that asylum seekers aren't being allowed in the US. And well, what we would want is asylum seekers are allowed in the US and not detained. But what was happening under many administrations, every administration, is that asylum seekers would be not all, but some detained at the detention center. So that, and similarly with the lawsuit at the Supreme Court, not having bond hearings for people at the 6-month mark means that a lot of people are detained for years and don't even have the opportunity to try to make their case before an immigration judge. So there's still a lot going on, and a lot going on, even with the Biden administration, there's a lot that we're still having to fight against. So there's a few questions. Do all detainees and staff have N95 masks? I have never seen an N95 mask at the detention center, so I've never seen anyone wearing those. Do we think the new requirement to pay minimum wage is impacting how long people are kept in detention? That's a good question. I don't know. So the people who make decisions about whether or not someone is detained are ICE, and the lawsuit was against GEO, which is the private company that runs the detention center. And obviously those two entities communicate with each other, but I don't know how ICE would, who is not the one who would be paying at least minimum wage, would be kind of how that would factor into their decision. There's some questions in the chat box, the other chat box about, does NWIRP have a policy position? Yes, I don't know exactly that I'm authorized to speak on behalf of NWIRP, but I think that yes, NWIRP advocates for closing the detention center, and NWIRP was a part of HB 1090, which is the new state law prohibiting private prison contracts in the state of Washington, that there are various lawsuits around. There was a lawsuit at the Ninth Circuit on the similar law in California that found that law unconstitutional. So that is not good news for the Washington law, but also it is a different law, and there could be any number of things that are different. That's the sort of thing that I know about, but not too much more than what's in the news. And what percentage of people coming out are getting asylum, ankle bracelet, post bond? Okay, those I don't know. I don't know. From what I've seen, if someone is granted a bond, it seems like they are not putting an ankle shackle on them. But it is different in different cases, and often when someone's released, they'll still have check-in appointments at a different ICE office where they could make a decision to put an ankle shackle on them. There's a question about MPP that I don't know. Since we don't represent people in those cases, my knowledge of that is about the same as, or is also from the news. So it's not something that I know that much about. Has the minimum wage policy gone into effect? That's a good question. I don't know. And I also don't know if that lawsuit is being appealed, or, I'm sure folks are familiar with, even if there is a court decision in a lawsuit, depending on how that decision is implemented or whether it's on appeal, it might not go into effect right away. But that is something that I should ask my clients, because I don't know for sure. So yeah, I think, I hope that was helpful for people. I know that was kind of maybe a lot of random scattered information, but I always appreciate the opportunity to talk with Aid Northwest or with other advocates working on the detention center issues, because I know as an attorney and focus on representing my clients, the immigration case is one issue, and then there's also so many other issues going on. So it's, I appreciate being able to talk to people about it. Say a little about you.
Oh, sorry. We did get one more question from Michelle. It says, does it have, from what I've observed, some being released have ankle monitors and others don't. Does it have anything to do with other factors besides whether they were bonded out?
That is a question that's super hard to specifically answer, because it's up to ICE. And I think sometimes we can't discern a really specific pattern or policy, but it depends on, many different factors, or this is where what I think gets taken into consideration, and I can't say for sure. So things like whether or not the person has been deported before, what their immigration case history is. So the biggest thing being whether or not they've been deported before or been in immigration court before. I think criminal history or criminal convictions are part of that consideration too. But we don't always see a really specific pattern, and that makes it hard to communicate with clients, because they of course want to know what's going to happen to them, and it makes it hard to say, I can't say for sure whether or not they'll put an ankle shackle on you, because there isn't a really specific policy, and definitely not one that's an articulated public policy. So that's always
It is an option for them though, right? I mean, if they want to get bonded out, they can ask for a monitor, for an ankle monitor. Is that correct? I mean, there's companies I know that work with that, and I know ICE has a monitoring spot as well up in SeaTac that people have come out and they have to like send their picture once a week, things like that, so that they make sure that they're still around.
Yeah, so that's part of, that's part of an ICE monitoring. Even I think sometimes those are implemented by private contractors, and I think GEO is one of them. But yeah, I think I wouldn't quite call it like an option, because I don't think that it's something that people want
to get out. But I mean, if they want to get out and they can pay for this monitoring program, right?
I think what you're talking about is a company offering to post the bond, and then as part of posting that bond, the private bond posting company puts an ankle monitor on a person, and that's not something that's through ICE. So that particular thing I haven't seen at the detention center in a while, because that company was doing this all across the country, and there were many lawsuits on many different issues with that. So that in particular, I haven't seen recently.
Yeah, we used to see them a lot at the detention center, but we don't see them very much anymore. So I wasn't sure if there was other companies offering it or not.
No, I mean, that I think there were a lot of problems with that. So I don't think that, I hope that is not something that's companies are going to keep doing. And I haven't seen it for a while. I see this one comment. One detainee said that people with cell phones don't have to get an ankle bracelet. I think that so there are some cell phone check-in and monitoring programs that ICE has, and sometimes those are connected to the ankle bracelet, and sometimes they're not. I think the big picture thing to take is there's a lot of federal government money pouring into monitoring people who are already showing up to their court cases, already showing up to their ICE check-in appointments, already showing up to their private contractor check-in appointments. And then there's, cell phone monitoring, ankle shackle monitoring. And it is, from what I've seen, not super predictable who has what restrictions, and that makes it hard to talk to clients about it, because they of course want to know. And Tim asked to talk a little about my personal caseload. So obviously I can't talk about anything confidential or anything too specific. So maybe I'll just talk about the types of cases that I take generally at NWIRP. So when you're a detained or an attorney who works in the detention center, it means you kind of take any type of immigration case, because you're just trying to help the person in deportation proceedings. So for me, that has meant taking a lot of asylum, withholding of removal, and convention against torture cases. And sometimes the client is someone who just came to the US as an asylum seeker, but sometimes the person has lived in the US for a long time and maybe didn't know that they had the option to apply for asylum, or didn't have access to that. Our clients are from all over the world, all different countries and languages. And that also means oftentimes we're working through interpreters. So that is always an extra challenge and layer to cases. I also work on bond and parole cases. I think one of the first things we're always thinking about when we take a case is there a way to get this person released from detention? So sometimes that means asking for a bond before an immigration judge, but sometimes the person isn't eligible to even have their case heard by a judge. And so then that means the only option is to ask ICE to release them, which is kind of an inconsistent process and also isn't something that can be appealed. I also work on cancellation of removal cases and other types of humanitarian cases like crime survivor visas, trafficking survivor visas, and then sometimes people who are eligible to get their green card through family members, although those cases are hard to come by because, as probably most people know, the restrictions for even if you have family members in the US, the restrictions for how to get your green card are make it very limited and very difficult to be able to do that. Is there anything we can do to help detainees obtain bond hearings? So to do that, the person has to make a written request to the court, and their NWIRP provides, or maybe it's even the court that provides pro se paperwork for someone to do that. That is, from what my experience, from what I've seen, people usually don't have difficulty, or compared to all the other difficulties, are usually able to get that hearing scheduled. That doesn't, just because they have a hearing doesn't mean that they'll be granted a bond. So let's see, one thing Deborah asked that I guess is related to this question, how do we select who we can help, is what is the caseload and the waiting list. So for NWIRP, for the detained cases, we do not have a waiting list because that's not possible, because cases move so quickly. And that's really tough because that means that there are people that we have to just say no to. Right now, because the number of people being detained is a little lower, and I think because people are also getting released, in some cases people are getting released, right now, at this exact moment, this changes all the time, but right now we haven't had to, we are able to accept cases, but there are plenty of times, probably the majority of times, when we try our best to first place a case with a pro bono attorney, and then if that doesn't work out, for one of our staff attorneys to take the case. But because we have way more, usually way more people needing attorneys than, or accredited representatives than are available, it means that that we do have to say no to people, and that we really wish that we didn't have to do that. So then in the other units at NWIRP, there are really long wait lists to get help from an attorney, and it's kind of different for different units. I don't have exact numbers or exact wait times because it's just not something that I work with, but I know that it's just a constant struggle with NWIRP that we, because of the size and aggression of the US immigration system, it means there are always many people who need, and because it's so complicated that for the most part, people are not reasonably able to do it on their own. It means that we have a long waiting list for all different types of people and types of cases. So that's something that we're always struggling with and talking about. And then on top of that, dealing with staff burnout, because it is tough, you know, the types of cases that we work on are tough. And then on top of that, feeling like, you know, we're working really hard and getting a lot of secondary trauma exposure. And then still there are so many people who need help is just a constant conversation and struggle at NWIRP. So, okay, there's a lot, or there's 4 more questions. What's going, oh my gosh, I should know the answer to the question, what is going on with Fry-Hot? And I don't. I think that Fry-Hot cases are still being processed at the detention center. So people are still being released for health conditions. But I don't remember what circuit that case was filed in, but there was a negative. I don't know, maybe someone else here knows. As far as our cases, we're still filing Fry-Hot requests, but I think that a circuit court recently gave a negative ruling in it. I was out of the office for 2 months and I I missed a lot of things, but Deborah, it seems like maybe you know. No, okay.
No, I can't answer that, sorry.
But we are still, submitting, and they are processing, from what I can tell, Fry-Hot requests. But there is, in terms of like the practicalities of it, but big picture, there is a threat to that whole. So some questions about what are criteria that we use to accept or deny cases. So we take any case where we think we can help the person. So then the biggest limit on that is our capacity. But that's kind of the simplest answer, is if we think having a legal advocate will make a difference. Why would someone be detained for 2+ years? Do appeals really take this long? Yes, they do. It's especially if someone, say they have their immigration court case, they appeal it to the Board of Immigration Appeals, then they appeal it to the 9th Circuit, maybe the 9th Circuit remands it back to the Board of Immigration Appeals. There's an unexplained delay, it gets back to the immigration court, it can absolutely take that long. And how will the closing of the detention center affect what NWIRP does? I don't think that we have, I think because of the many lawsuits going on with the detention center, we don't have, it's not like, okay, this is gonna happen for sure really soon, so let's implement a plan. So I think that there is still a lot of immigration work to be done if the detention center does close. And then this, maybe I'll have this be the last question, just in case there's any final questions. Is there any data about asylum cases that are won or lost? So we were actually just talking about this before the meeting started. There is a resource called TRAC, T-R-A-C, from Syracuse University that compiles data about immigration court and immigration judges around the country. And it's not super immediate. It's not super immediate data, but that's something that you can look up to learn about the Tacoma Immigration Court, learn about other immigration courts. And I think that they do aggregate it by asylum cases and other types of cases. Yeah, so that is one way. Okay.
Well, Julie, I know that you have to go. Do you want to take one more, or do you want to?
I'll take there's 2 more. One is about Google. So I don't use Google Translate for clients or documents. I think it's super tough to know. So like, I think the hope is that if the Remain in Mexico policy is, I think one, the hope is that it's taken away, and two, the hope is asylum seekers are not detained. As far as forecasts, I feel like anytime we try to like plan something, I think it's really hard to determine. So I hope that no, if the Remain in Mexico policy is reinstituted, there would not be more people who are detained. But I think that that's definitely possible, because there was a very high number of people at the detention center in, you know, all different administrations. So that'll be my last question.
Well, thank you
Thanks
very
so much,
much, Julie.
everyone.
Thank you, Julie. By the
Thank you,
way,
Julie.
when you get to the point where you can predict the future, I like to borrow your wand.
Okay. Yeah, maybe someone else.
Another
here
crystal
has-
ball would be even better.
I'll see what I can do.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
Mm.
So Deborah is going to give us a little information about what has happened recently at the both the Welcome Center and the Visitation Program. Some of you may or may not know, but we try to do some communications with the folks that are in the detention center. It's tough. It's essentially a pen pal type arrangement. And if that is of any interest to any of you, please don't hesitate to let us know. There are a lot of folks in there that love to receive communication. Okay, here's Deborah.
Okay, and I'm going to start with answering Michelle's question about the Google Translate. We don't recommend that you use Google Translate. If you really, I mean, for basic questions, you can use it, but we do have a whole list of interpreters on, you know, at the RV, and that is the best way to communicate with someone if you don't speak their language. So I don't think there's any apps out there that are better than others, but that's why we have these valuable people that speak those languages. So, and then I just wanted to talk about some statistics. Over the past 3 months, our volunteers have served over 550 people at the Welcome Center and given over 500 coats, which, you know, that's amazing. We have written over 300 letters to detained people. So as Tim was talking about, if you are interested in becoming a pen pal, you can go directly to our website and look under Get Involved. And then at the bottom of the page, there is an application that you can fill out. And then those get sent directly to me. We also had 69 people stay at our house. So that's outstanding too. We've been able to help people a couple nights or, you know, week, or we've even have a couple people there that are going to be there for about 3 months while they're trying to get their paperwork going for asylum cases and that. You can read about more about what we do on our website, and our newsletters are under news and events at the bottom of the page, and they also show all of those statistics and a lot of really good articles in there too. And if you want to sign up to be on our mailing list, which most of you probably are, unless you've been shared, if somebody shared this link with you, there is at the bottom of that page, Get Involved. Also, you can click on sign up to be on our mailing list, and we'll get you added to that. In order to continue running and maintaining our programs, we need help with social media, website ideas, and fundraising. So we have committees that work behind the scenes and do that work. And We really need people with those skills. So if you have any of those skills and you're interested, same thing, go onto our website under Get Involved, and the application is at the bottom of the page. And if you don't know our website, it's aidnw.org. So, you know, just a special thank you to all of our volunteers who keep us running, and our donors who keep us being able to help people, and, you know, all that. So if anybody has any questions after the meeting, you can email me, and my email address is dcruz@aidnw.org.
Deborah, I want you to talk a little bit about the Hope for the Holidays.
Oh, yes. So our Hope for the Holidays program, if you don't know about it, we had a campaign where we were asking for, but we started with churches, money for detainees for commissary funds. We do give out phone funds, which is, you know, that's a normal thing that we do on one of our programs. But this was a special program for the holidays. We raised $5,985, and we were able to send out 178 money orders so far. So we're still collecting names from inside the detention center. We don't have a list. ICE doesn't give us a list. So we are coordinating with Catherine, our visitation mentor, who does an amazing job, by the way. And she answers our hotline, and people call to ask for those commissary funds, because we've also included in the letters that we're sending out with the money orders to people, a note in there saying that if anybody in your pod has not gotten a money order, please send us a list of those. And so they're mailing those to the office, and we're adding those to our list for our next round of money orders. So it was a huge success, and got a couple of phone calls from people inside thanking us for doing that, and, you know, letting us know that they don't have anybody. Some people don't even have family that they can ask for money for. So, you know, it just a cup of soup, you know, or some Cheetos or whatever makes them, you know, a little bit more happy while they're inside. So thank you, all of you who donated to that program as well.
I should also mention that my understanding is that the work party that put together these money orders, they actually had food. Nobody told me they were going to serve food. I would have come.
Yes, we had tamales and rice and beans, and but
Yeah.
you know what? They came again, and we didn't have food that time. So yeah, so I think they they really like us.
What? Anyway, well, thank you all for attending. I would like to urge any of you, if you have any interesting topics for future community meetings, please let us know. You just email officevolunteer@aidnw.org. Give us some ideas for your topics. We will try something crazy in the near future. We will actually probably start planning ahead of time, rather than Deborah and I sitting down together 4 weeks ahead of time. Oh, what are we going to do? Anyway, we have a lot of things going on. If any of you are not involved and would like to become involved, don't hesitate. We have plenty of work to spread around. That will not be a problem.
Right.
Any further questions, ideas, or here's a Natalie, do I see a question?
Yeah, we do have a question from Melvin. It says, do you want to mention your speaker service?
Oh, Deborah, you want to do that, or
Do you want to mention what?
Speaker Bureau?
Oh, we do have a speakers bureau that can go out and talk to your church, your community organizations, any group that you would like for them to speak to. They do Zoom presentations. And so if you are interested in having someone do that, you can contact me, and I will get someone to talk to you about Aid Northwest.
I should mention a few things that the board is pursuing at this point in time. We formed a few months ago a new committee, which is called the Community Outreach. This is headed up by one of the board members. The intent is to establish a more formal relationship with a lot of the other organizations in the area, Tacoma Community House, NWIRP, so that we actually have a more of a formal communications channel. Primarily not, so we leverage each other's capabilities, not just headed up by Patty Kilpatrick. We recently were approached by Radio Tacoma, and they will do periodic updates of what's happening at the Welcome Center visitation. I'm not, frankly, right off the top of my head, I don't remember where it is on the dial, but it's an FM station. And we're just starting that now. So that should be quite interesting. And the other thing is that we were approached by a professional public relations firm, thanks to one of our volunteers made that connection for us. And we will be investigating what does it take for us to become more active in that. We really need to expand the audience of folks that are aware of what we do, and perhaps, well, gain their financial support or moral support. I always tell the story when we worked at the Welcome Center, how folks come out this time of year in t-shirts and jeans, and you forget that they're picked up at the border, and in the summer what they're wearing is what they came across the border with. And so when Deborah said that we handed out almost as many coats as we had people released at the RV, you really realize really come out with almost nothing. In the early days, we have people that picked up here in the US. Of course, they had families, friends, and so they had a lot of stuff, but now it's pretty slender. So these things are important. Oh, somebody told me that Radio Tacoma is 101.9 FM. There you go. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you for coming. Please consider hot topics you'd like to see us cover, and we will consider including it. Thank you very much. Have a very good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.